Introducing the Poet Life Podcast. Go check it out today on your favorite platforms, including iTunes, Apple Music, and the website, thepoetlife.com.
Find the way.
Hey, it's the Poet Life Podcast. You have Christoph Wrights here. My co-host, J-Rod D, is not in the house right now. He just had a baby girl. So he is out changing diapers and loving on his baby daughter. So I'm going to hold it down tonight. Listen, I'm in Maryland, close to D.C., right outside of the madness of the election and everything. But I have a treat for everybody. I have an awesome group called Words of a Fiddler's Daughter, and they are in the UK. Listen, so we have Murray, Jesse, and Adam. How y'all doing?
Not so bad, thanks. Great to be with you.
Really good.
Awesome. Where in the UK are you?
Murray, why don't you go first?
Well, I'm in a little place called Retford, which is in Nottinghamshire. So sort of middly bit of England. It's called the Midlands.
Basically where Robin Hood was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And was that a joke? Or is that the truth?
No, that's true.
Yeah,
True.
Yeah, I'm very near to Sherwood Forest. So.
Yeah. And we're in the middle of Derbyshire. And I don't know if you've ever seen or read Pride and Prejudice, but
Yes.
we live about 15 miles from Mr. Darcy's estate.
But we don't own it.
But we don't own it. So,
Okay.
Never met him either. No.
but yeah, there you go. So that's where we are.
And you mentioned the madness in Washington, which reminds me of the only gig I've ever done in Washington. I was using a radio mic on my fiddle, and because there was something wrong with the way the frequencies had all been set up, halfway through the gig, we started to get police cars. We had people talking on the radio saying, yeah, let's go down there and we'll get the guy.
Right.
Well, but not in that accent, obviously.
Yeah.
That aside, that was my madness in Washington.
Yeah.
What year was that?
Oh, it was
2008?
2007 maybe, I think.
Okay.
A while ago.
Okay. Awesome. Was that your first time in the States or no?
No, I've
Been there before and since.
been there before and since. No, I've traveled. Actually, I've driven about 30,000 miles in the States, and I was just counting today. There are only 9 states I've not actually played a concert in.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
We'll have to work out a little tour to cover those.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can't
we
say
will.
the same at the moment.
Well, when you all do, let me know when it happens. I would love to, take a look at it and be a part of it.
Yeah, you'll be a special guest.
And we should probably just say you've introduced us as Words of the Fiddler's Daughter.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm the fiddler. That's the daughter.
Hey.
The words are hers. Murray plays the accordion, but
Yep.
the poetry is well.
Okay.
Are your father and daughter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't put two and okay.
Well, this is my dad.
I didn't put 2 and 2 together. Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So Adam and Murray, you all are in a group.
We are.
Or
We
the
have
band.
We're in a group, duo, band, call it what you like. But
Thing.
yeah, the two of us, we're in a number of different products together, but our prime thing is a duo. We go by the name of the Cider House Rebellion. And what we do a lot of is improvised music. So we're both trained musicians. We've both got all that experience behind us. But what we found works really well for us is music in the moment, being able to play together, because we know each other's playing so well that we can have that instant musical conversation. We can start, one of us can start something and the other responds and reacts, and you really do end up with full, proper, inventive dialogue, but without us really knowing what the subject material was before we started the conversation.
Or even afterwards. It's interesting, actually. Murray said the poetry's all Jesse's, but I just had a thing running through my head today. Don't know why. that basically music is poetry,
Yeah.
and poetry is music. And
Indeed.
so
Yeah, well,
I don't think poetry is all Jesse's. I think what we do is
Is poetry too.
unique because kind of, is that going like a 3? It's very hard to tell in this thing. Oh dear, no. Anyway,
It's a three-way conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
3 poets talking to each
yeah,
other.
we actually,
I know what he's doing.
we've got a
Wow.
yeah, we did actually have that in a review recently where somebody was commenting that they wished that the poetry had been a little higher in the mix, and we all reacted the same, going, hang on a minute, it's not poetry with music in the background. It is 3 parts, it's 3 voices, and just
In a
2 of us aren't
conversation.
using words. That's
Yeah.
the only difference. And so I think it is something that is utterly satisfying for me. It's the fact that I can have this conversation with those 2 lunatics there, and it's an equal conversation. It most definitely, we are not the accompanists, nor is Jesse in some way commentating on our music. It is a definite symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, when I'm reading the poem out, obviously I've written it beforehand, although I did do one
You've
improvised,
one
which went quite well.
Absolutely beautiful. Actually.
But when I'm reading the poetry, I have no kind of preconception of how I want it to sound. I listen to what they're doing, and their music informs my reading just as much as the words do. So I think it's quite special in that way because it's a collaboration at like the kind of deepest level. It's a transfer of musical thought and creative energy, and yeah, I mean, I don't know if they feel the same, but
we had an interesting thing last week, very recently anyway. It was National Poetry Day here in
the UK last week.
Okay.
And I was actually still asleep, and Jessie came. She's not at university at the moment. She's at home because blah blah blah.
Right.
Everything's a bit weird, but she's going back next week. Fingers crossed.
I'm going back tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Whoa.
If you move the way the weeks work. She came bursting into my bedroom and said, "Daddy, it's National Poetry Day. I've got an idea that we could do," and I didn't really listen because I was very much asleep, but I said yes. But what it turned out was that we were going to she was going to write a new poem. Murray and I were going to accompany it that day. And then she said, well, kind of, this was a tiny bit later once I had woken up a bit, how should we do it? And I said, look, you haven't written it yet. Just tell Murray basically what it's going to be about. He will record a kind of 6 or 7 minute track, because that's how long all her poems are mostly, except the one for a quarter of an hour.
Yeah.
That feels to him to be on the same kind of subject. Her stuff's always emotional. It's always, I don't know, the feeling of history, and you can feel a sense of it. Mm-hmm. So I said, look, let's just get him to record first. Then he'll send that track to me, because we were all in, well, Murray and we, or us, or however you say it in English, you can tell me?
Probably not.
In different places. So send it to us, and then I played along to it, which I got a good luck with that from Murray when he sent it. But actually, it was incredibly easy. It was exactly like playing with him in the flesh. I knew where it was going to go. I knew how to play with it.
You didn't listen to it beforehand, did you?
No, I just put it on, played through. So you hear Murray's once through, my once through.
Yep.
Then I stuck those together in a thing for Jessie so she could hear both of them. We made a little
mattress box
with her in it.
to make the sound flat enough.
Better sound.
Yeah,
right.
Enclosed in small spaces.
Played that to her, and she just recorded over it.
And that was it.
And that was it. That's the creation. And for me, it's magical, because what Murray created in response to her concept was exactly what her concept turned out to be. And the thing I put in the middle just tied the two things together. And we created, well, I think you've heard it. It's the one called The Sleeper that we did last week. That's how it came out.
Did you all release it the same day?
Yeah.
It was recorded, written, performed, edited, mixed
And
And
released.
out.
in about 10 hours, would you say?
Yeah,
Something like
yeah.
that?
Wow, that's
Well, that's
awesome.
from concept. It
That's
was,
from
it was
concept,
less
yeah.
than that in terms of actually stuff being recorded.
But
That's awesome.
I mean, in our new album, in fact, all of the tracks are their first take.
Yeah, they want
Everyone
Yeah.
just started and just went with it. There was no pre-planning. It was just, okay, you start playing. I'm reading a poem about this. Here we go, and that was that. And we have a whole album of it, which is kind of exciting. So
that for me is proof that it is conversational.
Mm.
You don't rehearse. We're not rehearsing this conversation. We're having a conversation.
Right.
And it's exactly the same thing that we have that conversation. And it can be a very serious conversation. We can be talking about really powerful thoughts and history about what happened in our country 1,000 years ago. That it's heavy stuff, but it is a conversation and an instinctive and instant reaction to that story. And I think in some ways that can be more powerful than the slow, careful, considered response. That instant emotive moment is something really rather
And
powerful.
everything the other person says has an immediate reaction. It's like a conversation that starts around the dinner table and ends up somewhere completely differently to where it started, in a way that emotionally and the reflections on it, it's all, in this case, compared to the things that Murray do on our own, where we will start somewhere and who the hell knows what we'll finish up. With Jesse,
That's certainly true.
with Jesse, it's tied in more because the words will keep bringing you back to a certain place, a certain direction that she's already responded to.
yeah, so
It's a fascinating thing for me, anyway.
at this point, I think it's worth giving a tiny bit of context to the poems themselves. So I wanted to base every poem on a historical moment, like in medieval England. So think swashbuckling knights and Vikings. But it wasn't all like that. And I've chosen a certain number of these kind of historical moments and then imagined a sort of folk tale from them. And that folk tale is very much
They're quite dark.
They're quite dark.
There are a lot of wolves.
There are lots of wolves. I hate wolves. But they're very much informed by the land around me. And what I think is really interesting is that all of that, the conversation that I've been having with the history and the conversation that I've been having with the land, is then kind of all at once in conversation with them. And I think it produces something really special because it's not just, in some ways, it isn't just three people talking. I'm going to have another revolutionary thought here. maybe it's the history and the world around us talking too.
Yeah, for me, there's something about, it's how music is for me anyway, but it's also something about her poetry. It's not just a modern girl interpreting history. It's a kind of feels if it's talking to the memories, talking to the ghosts, the spirit of the land, the things that are past. I don't know. It's when we look back at that stuff, you've got a sense of all the people who've who've suffered, probably mostly on the whole. Some people are probably happy along the way, but not everybody. And harsh stuff, harsh worlds, and that's somehow captured in what she writes. Even the more upbeat bits, of which there are about one.
I know there are two. There are two.
You can tell they're father and daughter, can't you?
Jesse, let me ask you, when did you start writing poetry?
So my grandma used to read me poems ever since I was tiny. She used to read me.
Could be last week, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm
you can't tell she's sitting down.
I'm
She's
5'2", just for context. So to make fun of how small I am. But she's been reading me poems forever. She used to read me things like Yeats. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's an Irish poet, and all sorts of other really kind of important people. And at the time, it just felt like she was reading me stories. There was no kind of, oh, she's giving me a literary education. It was just magical. And from that,
and she would sometimes write a poem for you as well.
Yeah, she wrote poems
just about
for me
little
too.
day-to-day
Nice.
things.
Yeah. And then, of course, from that, I started writing poems. And interestingly enough, the other day,
This is funny.
the other day, I found like an old notepad. I was sorting out a room, and in it was at last, yeah. And in it was this kind of it's my writing, but done with a crayon, and it had some rather crude illustrations with it. I must have been
Crude in the
about
sense of being
awful,
primitive,
awful.
very young.
I must have been about 6 or so.
We're not sure, but between 6 and 8. Anyway.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that it was a poem, and it was a poem in very much the style I still write. Some of the words were less sophisticated, less well put together, but
less
actually,
well spelled.
if they were spelt really badly, but actually since then I've always had a kind of way of writing. It's never changed from there. It's just been
Really.
a constant kind of flow, and obviously I've improved. I'm doing an English literature degree at university, so I'm surrounded all the time by like these amazing people and
that's what's interesting.
And
whatever you're surrounded by, your voice from being too small to spell until now, when you can almost
has stayed
spell,
the same.
Your voice is almost totally the same.
Yeah.
So that's a fascinating thing, because even with everything around you,
it's still the same intention, I think.
And that for me is one of the beautiful things about what we're all doing together, because, and I think what Murray and I are doing together, more so for me than for Murray, I think it's something that I have always, the way I'm playing suddenly with this and being able to put stuff together, is what I've always done. Whenever I picked up a violin, that's what I've played. And now suddenly it's come into a context where I've got another musician who I start doing that, and instead of it just being me on my own, it's amplified. The things that I'm half thinking turn into full thoughts. The full thoughts get moved into a poem or a story or whatever. It's amazing. For me, it's absolutely extraordinary, Murray. Thank you. And then Jesse, having heard this, has kind of, I think, felt how special it is and found a way of adding another voice, which in some ways makes it even better, I think.
It just makes it a more interesting tapestry. It's larger, it's got more to say, and people pick out different things from the poems and the from the music. There's no one interpretation. It's very much depends on the individual listening. So I mean,
we need a word for what it is, actually.
Yeah, we have no word.
So that's an opportunity to coin the name.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely. Let me ask you. So this album, right?
Quick,
yeah, pull it up. Shameless plug.
Quick. Is this? Can you see
this?
Yes. This is our new album.
Pronounce that for me. Runian.
Runian. And it's whisper in Old English, which is what they spoke in early medieval times. So the whisper, I guess, is just trying to encapsulate that idea that we're channeling something. We're listening to old stories and reinterpreting and creating something new to say.
But what really blows my mind is the timeline. Talk about the timeline.
So I wrote the first poem I don't think it was March. I think it was April.
Yeah, later.
I think it was in April.
So a month in.
A month into lockdown. And then...
Well, that went out 2 days later.
2 days later, yeah, on a kind of...
I mean, it's worth giving the context that in March, Adam and I, living 50 miles or whatever that is, 80 kilometres apart, could not meet. We were absolutely, totally locked down. We weren't allowed to drive, 5 kilometres was not allowed. So we were not going to meet. We were not going to be able to even socially distance, do some recording or anything. So we had to decide, do we just say, hey, there you go, we'll see each other in the future and do our own domestic things, of which there was plenty to do.
Well, Mary had a new baby.
I had a son on February the 29th, so I was a little busy. But creativity doesn't stop. And I think for us, if it were stopped, I think we'd probably go even more insane than we already are.
Think
So
we-
we
Yes.
had to find a way. We had to be able to keep playing, keep creating, and keep listening to each other.
Mm.
And we went through this mad series of experiments, starting off thinking it would be easy. Hey, let's just go on to FaceTime, let's go on to Skype, whatever it
Mm.
might be. And it's a disaster, complete unmitigated disaster, because as soon as you digitize, as soon as you're on the internet, because of the nature of digitization and compression and all the rest of it, it
Right.
built in a latency. It might be
Delay.
half a second, it might be 1 second, but after I play, Adam was hearing it a second later. And when you can't
Mhm.
play in time with each other when there's that big a delay, and we tried all sorts of experiments to no avail, until finally, one crazy idea was, well, hang on, copper wire doesn't have any latency. So what about the old-fashioned telephone wire? They still exist, the internet comes through it, but we could call each other on the phone, the normal old-style phone. Let's give it a go. So we did, and wow, no latency, absolute real-time.
Landline, not cell phone.
And
Yeah,
not
landline.
cell phone.
I don't even have a
Oh,
landline phone.
Well, we do.
We do.
We both had to buy one.
Wow.
So we found that it was theoretically possible, although it sounded appalling.
Okay.
But we
When you hear the
persevered.
other person, it's
So
terrible.
you end up with both of us microphones on our instruments as normal.
So we're
sending that
recording.
to-
We're recording in the room that we're playing in.
yeah, we
We
record
have
the
a good
atmosphere.
microphone to record exactly what we're doing, but we also have to send that sound down the landline to the other person so we can react in real time.
So you've now got an old-fashioned telephone that has got a set of headphones sellotaped onto the earpiece, to the mouthpiece, to send the sound, and then a microphone clamped onto the earpiece to do a monitor link back to ourselves. So we've both at each end got this mad system, and through the worst crackles and distortions and weird noise you can imagine, we could actually hear each other,
Which was
And-
magical.
which was a very exciting moment.
Because
There
it's
is
worth
on
saying,
YouTube. There is one, the very first test. It's a minute long, and it is still gives me goose pimples. It's amazing.
and just the thing to understand, we've all seen a load of things that people have made through lockdown, but they've all been done in the way where person number one will record and there'll maybe be a click track.
Right.
And then the next person gets their line and they put that in over the top, and then it's all put together in a studio afterwards, which I'm not knocking it, but what we wanted to do was we wanted to just do it like talking, because that's how we make our music.
We do.
Mm. Wow. So basically, no excuses.
No excuses. Absolutely. You've got
No
to do
excuses.
It, and it's
Get it
happening
done.
now. Hit record. Happens.
So we actually produced, well, Murray and I produced a ridiculous number of tracks over that period, lots of which we put on the CD. Others are just not on the disc because the disc's only so long.
Well, we were doing
Wait,
a
wait.
weekly Facebook live show to our fans. That's what it started with.
Oh, that's true.
Putting together video of us doing this for a 30 to 40 minute long weekly Facebook live. But of course, we recorded it at the same time. That's the way it worked. And then thought, this is actually, there's some good stuff happening here. And so it became, well, could we actually turn this into an album? So that was the starting point for Adam and myself for Cider House.
So they have produced
Jesse was living
an
through
album. Yeah, they've produced an album over lockdown and a second album with me.
Yeah, our album's the Insider Sessions because we were inside.
Man, this is amazing.
And then
Yeah.
There we go.
There it is. Oh, look at that.
Right on cue.
I wouldn't be able to find mine. But then Jessie'd heard all this and she got inspired to join us. But our turnaround with these tracks was just we did with her 2 in consecutive weeks.
Yeah.
So we just recorded, and it was one of the 3 tracks that we released new that next week.
Yeah,
But then we said, let's sorry, carry on.
Yeah, three tracks a week. We were doing 3 brand new tracks, of which 2 were poetry. Plus, we recorded us talking to each other as a little show. So that was where it all started.
And then we found actually my mother's place, which is this really long house where we could find a way to be separated in rooms that we weren't too close together. We could have separation for sound, but more importantly, at that point, that we, with lots of alcohol wipes and masks and this, that, and the other, we could do a safe recording. We turned up for a day. It was a day. You came up in the morning.
It was an afternoon.
It was an afternoon. We recorded the whole rest of the disc in the afternoon, every track just once, apart from one moment where Murray and I played something that amused us and Jessie thought wasn't funny.
They slipped into a kind of gypsy klezmer kind of. It wasn't appropriate anyway.
No, we knew it wasn't appropriate. That's why.
It wasn't appropriate.
But apart from that,
was funny.
It was funny.
And then I don't know, not 3 weeks later, the whole thing was
Mixed, done.
processed, done. Went to an absolutely fantastic mastering engineer, John Astley, in London.
Okay.
He's mastered for people like the
He's just done
Who,
The Who
and
Yeah, he's done the Who remasters and things like that. So
they're a
anyone
big
you've
British
heard
thing,
of. He's a
I
good
don't
friend
know.
of Eric Clapton, all that kind of stuff, you know.
So who's the producer? Both of you?
yeah.
Mary?
Yeah,
Adam?
both.
I'm the
Murray did all the
engineer.
engineering, really.
Okay.
And we produced that between us. Murray probably a little bit more than me, but kind of both.
You all are saving so much money.
Oh, yeah. Which is good, because we're not earning a lot these days.
Exactly.
We're not earning it. So.
That's absolutely amazing because
You know, there's another thing that. Oh, sorry. Just
go ahead. No, go.
I was going to say, we did all this, and then Murray said, "Well, you should have a book, Jessie." So she said, "Yeah, okay, I'll do a book, won't I, Daddy?" Here's the book, which
So I don't know. If that's the wrong way.
it's beautiful. But not only does it have the poems in that she'd written then, it's got 2 others, I think, and a series of little preludes that go before each poem. She and I illustrated it between us, and it was a total pain in the ass to get it ready, but it's done and it's beautiful. So
I feel like I'm not doing anything in life right now. Oh my God. 2 albums and a book since March.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
and a newborn.
And a newborn, yeah.
Only for Murray.
Only for Murray, yeah. And I mean, I personally have also written
2 other collections.
2 other collections. So I have another collection which is 50 pages long, and one that is something like 100 and something
that's massive.
pages long.
She's got a collection of poems that she wrote. This whole thing was like pulling the stopper out of, sometimes if you get a bottle of, it has to be cider, a bottle of hard cider, but it's not been completely properly brewed, so when you take the top of it, it just goes everywhere.
Yeah.
That's what's happened. It's just like somebody pulled the top out of the poetry and there's fucking poems everywhere. I didn't say that word. I meant
language
everywhere. And it's just been extraordinary. She's just created so much. It was my birthday not very long ago, and we'd been on a Scottish island for a while, and it turned out that every day we'd been there, she'd written a poem contextualizing this wild, beautiful landscape and something about it. It's absolutely beautiful, Murray. It's something we are going to become integrated with before too long. But the other thing she's written is just it's
Jessie, when did you start performing?
March.
Yeah.
No, April.
April, sorry.
Wait, so you
Your
started
first-
writing when you were younger, but you just started performing?
Yeah.
In fact, you have done your first live gig.
We did.
Yeah,
we
2 actually.
went
Oh,
to
no.
we went to a festival last weekend. No, the weekend before last now. And I did a track live there. It was all socially distanced. We were basically in a field, and in that field there were lots of little white circles on the ground that people had to stay in.
Mm-hmm.
But we performed it live, so
The only live gig we've managed since March. And
this is something amazing, because I said to Murray, well, I don't know whether we should maybe we could invite Jessie to do something or not. What do you think? And we weren't completely sure because we didn't know if the festival was right for what we were doing. But we decided to. He knows she's never performed before. He just was totally cool with it. Okay, it'll be fine. It'll be great. We did our set, the first however much of it, 2/3 of it, and then invited her on, and it was great. Neither of us had a moment of being worried what it was going to be like. It was like performing with somebody who'd been doing their entire life at the height.
You was all
better than what we'd been doing.
you all operate in rawness, and so that's not even an issue for you all, it sounds like.
Yeah,
I'd agree. In fact, I find now Adam may say he's been doing this all his life because he doesn't know how to obey rules and so on, but I would say that having done the whole, like Adam, I've done the whole strict training, the classical degree and all the rest of it. It's only recently that I found the real voice by not being given the words.
I like that.
Now, talking as a musician, I'm not meaning actual words, obviously, but previously I might have been playing a new work written by a new composer, or I might have been doing a transcription of Bach or whoever, or I might even be playing an old folk tune. But it's still not my voice. It is me reading somebody else's voice. And it's all absolutely fine, and I still do that sort of work. I'm not belittling it. But what I have found in the last probably 2 years now, to have the freedom and the flexibility for which I need a partner like Adam, to be able to say what I'm actually thinking, feeling at that moment, almost before I know it. And that is what I found unbelievably fascinating about this, is that I am able to say things that I then realize I wanted to say before I knew I wanted to say them. I can listen back to recordings and go, gosh, did I actually play that? Where did that come from? But at the same time, knowing that it is absolutely genuine, it is absolutely me speaking, but it's a subconscious me almost. It's an instinctive inner voice.
I think that's true for all of us. So when I write poems, they're not considered and slow. I do the research, I read the history, and then I sit down and I write it. And more often than not, I don't go back over and change anything. I just write it out once. That's it. Done. Not including punctuation and capital letters.
I'm going to say you might put a comma in sometimes.
I put a comma in sometimes. But I think for all of us, our art forms are very much based on our stream of consciousness, or perhaps stream of subconsciousness, rather than it being something like, I don't think, I really need to alliterate in this line. I'm like, it just happens. It's not I'm not picking up on devices and thinking I must make sure I include this and I need to make sure this happens. It all just flows. And I think that is the same thing for you as well, and obviously for Murray, he's just said. So
for me, it comes from, sorry.
No, say.
I was going to say, for me, it's come from forever in my creative life. Of course, I've loved, as Murray said, I'm classically trained. I've played Beethoven concerto in the place where he first had it played. That, I've done serious things and I've loved it. But actually, for me, I always had this feeling that what music is about is an instinctive communication. I hope it's not extinct. Those musicians in the United Kingdom, let's not go there. Anyway, an instinctive communication where, in the first place, we only basically, before language, we had kind of pitch and rhythm, and that's what music gives you. And the concept that you could link into your own instinctive pitch and rhythm and just allow that to flow. Basically, put a violin in my hands, I can talk to you and be doing whatever, but music will still be coming out almost without me, well, definitely without me having anything to do with it.
Playing the violin all the time.
Much to her pleasure.
Oh, yes.
When did you start, Adam?
Oh, I was that big, probably, maybe that
wow.
big. But the thing is, if you can let that just flow, and if you can keep your thinking mind out of the way, as long as all the bits
Don't
are,
think.
as long as everything functions, of course, you've really got to be able to play the instrument. But then you can create something magical, and it's kind of what your poetry is like as well. It's letting it flow without thinking.
Try not to think.
It's not to say that's the only way to create. Of course, it's not. And fantastic, wonderful things can be created in other ways. Okay, I'm talking.
I think for me, one of the amazing moments, we did an hour-long live filming for a storytelling festival here in the UK, and so we did. I think it was 6 of the songs that are on the album, but they are completely different to the album because we can't remember what we recorded for the album. We just are playing what happens that day. But then Jessie did something that still to this day seems amazing, seems incredible to me. She did exactly what we do. So not written down beforehand, not thought out beforehand. Okay, Jess, off you go. Say a poem now, on the spot, to camera, and we played. We didn't know what she was going to say. She didn't know what she was going to say. And it is flawless. You can write it down and analyze it.
Beautiful.
And that, to me, that still has blown my mind. Don't tell Jessie.
We call that freestyling here.
Yeah. So I sat down and essentially closed my eyes and thought, right. Then they started playing the music and it just happened. There was no kind of conscious deliberation. It was all just already there.
But what was interesting actually was if she'd had to create that as a standalone poet, it would have been different. It would have been different, and perhaps not as successful because the music took off from every phrase and gave space in between the phrases. I think it gave a moment for the next phrase to generate in a way that if you're just on your own talking, maybe a little less so. So it was an astonishingly powerful thing.
It was a great moment. It is on YouTube if anyone fancies.
Yeah.
What's the
It's called Grieving Jaws. Grieving Jaws. And I did introduce it at the time by saying, well, if you hear this,
then it went well.
Wow. So let me ask you about the business behind this, right? Like, so, and I talk to poets all the time. Obviously, it's a podcast, but when you incorporate other things outside of your words, outside of your poetry, right? That I think adds more value and kind of actually puts you in another lane to where the person who's booking you actually looks at you as a band now and not just a poet. And so, right. And so already we know in the poetry industry, they don't pay poets enough. Right. Yeah. So, but now that you come, period. Like, but now that you come as a band, it's a different story now.
It puts me in essentially the position of a singer.
Yes.
I'm not a singer. I speak. But if you look at somebody like, I don't know if you've heard of Kate Tempest or someone like that, again, that's not a poet anymore. She is a musician. Even though she's speaking or something. And it's a really
She's an artist.
She's an artist. Yes. It's an interesting position to be occupying because I'm not just a poet. I'm a spoken word artist too. And it's hard to define, but in terms of business, yes, you are automatically opening other avenues. There are places where I couldn't have performed and that you couldn't have performed at. It's
a two-way street, definitely.
Right.
So, I mean, for me, for example, I performed at a live folk music festival. My poetry is not folk music, but if it's with folk music, then I can perform that. Equally, say I performed at let's just say a university institution, just because it's the easiest to think about, they wouldn't be playing there if it was like the literature department or something
the
necessarily.
storytelling festival that we played
we would
remotely because it was all online because of the world being as it is. But again, we wouldn't have been there
if it wasn't for the fact that they were playing with my story. So for both parties, or all three, or whatever, I don't know. But it is definitely opening avenues which weren't there for us before.
But as she said, it's interesting because those avenues are definitely opened. But you also have the chance, and we don't know yet, the world has been in a strange state since
we started this.
Equally, if we're playing folk music, is a folk festival going to book something with a poet? And is a literature festival going to book something with music? We could go the other way entirely. We could be making dead ends for ourselves in all directions. But actually, it doesn't matter for us in a way, because what we've created, at least for us at this time, is something that feels utterly real and important and genuine and
whether
special.
we get booked or not, it matters to us. So
sure.
So that's a good thing. And
but not only that, though, not only the different lanes, but you all coming together, you've added years to your experience. So Jesse, you coming together with your father and Mary, I don't know how many years combined, but as a group,
I want to think.
But you're no longer a just starting poet.
Exactly.
No, it's true. She's not. And actually, you're absolutely right. The next thing that we are doing together as a group, unless Jesse tells us tomorrow we're doing something else in the meantime, which keeps happening, we're putting together a historical thing in the North York Moors of England. It's a wild, not wild compared to the wilds of America, but there are very few houses. It's bleak. It's windswept. It's country. It's got ancient.
It isn't farmed either.
Yeah,
it's like a wasteland almost, but not
almost.
quite.
And it's a place where there was ancient mining. Not that ancient, actually. 100 years ago.
That's true. There was.
Yeah, I know.
Prior mining,
but and what we're doing is going into that landscape, into those ruins, into the history of that. We're going to record music improvised live, literally in those places.
In location, at location.
While Jesse while Jesse performs poems that she's just about to be writing, based on not only the actual history, of which there's loads, but kind of imagined histories coming from it, and her understanding of that landscape, which she's known since she was a very small child.
I mean, where I stay at uni is 10 minutes walk from a set of these ruins, these old kind of kilns where they smelted the iron ore and then shipped it all off to be sold in big cities. And it's been a place that is very much part of my heritage in a way for a long time, and so we're all quite excited.
So we're making a new thing. It's
and we're collaborating hopefully with an actual archaeologist on site who knows this is in the process of exploratory digging and restoration and protection of this history. So and it's a history that perhaps we don't know as much as English. I'm going to say English because it's in England. That we don't know as much about. It's not the standard history. We all at school study certain areas of history and we all know it. This is every bit as vital and important and was part of the last 200 years of the nation, and yet we know virtually nothing about it.
So when you talk about adding value, we're taking the poetry of our music, we hope, what Jesse's going to create from it, adding that together with experts on the history, with hopefully some great filming, to make something, we hope, special and different, and we'll see.
Yes.
I like that. How did that come together? Did you say that already? How did that come together?
It was an accident. So,
beautiful accident.
Yeah, I wasn't there when this initially happened. He was on a walk. He was going to the pub actually, and he was walking around the top of this valley where all of these old ruins are, and he bumped into a team of archaeologists digging. And he said, "Oh, this is great. Can I bring my family back and we'll have a look round?" And he's like, yeah, next weekend. So the weekend after, we all kind of traipsed up there all the way around the top of the valley
walk.
in big coats, and it's freezing over here at the moment. And then we were shown around, and at the end of this kind of tour of this site, which was completely just because they wanted to share what they were doing. There was no kind of obligation.
It's not a normal thing.
Yeah. At the end of it, my dad said to the manager, he said, "I might have an idea. I'll email you." And I said, "What idea?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'll tell you later." And I'm like, "You're talking about poems, aren't you?" And then we said, "Okay, we'll just quickly pitch it to this guy," who said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it." And then we told Murray that he was doing it. And that was that.
It's the way my world works, really. What's
So,
this job going to be?
So you all's music and, well, you all's poetry is going to be like the atmospheric.
Yes. The way that
More than that.
Yeah, we had a whole site meeting last weekend before, something like that. And this was actually quite an important question for me to understand. Because we have, as I'm sure you have over in the States, we have quite a lot of TV shows where you watch an archaeological dig, and you've got a team of experts on site, and they dig something up and they tell you the history and show you a broken pot and a bit of a brick, and that's basically the TV show done. But the one area that they really don't go into is what it was like as a human in that situation. So in this project, we're dealing with guys who are having to work in the harshest of conditions, underground, with candles and sticks of dynamite, digging out iron ore. And if they don't dig out enough in a day, they don't get paid a penny.
And they have to buy the candles and the dynamite from their employer
up front. So yeah, it's appalling labor, appalling working conditions. So okay, we could discuss the history of iron ore mining and the railway that was used and the money and all of that. But what about that bloke who came from all over the country? He could have travelled 500 miles to come and live, work, probably die there, but surrounded by another 200 blokes and that community working and suffering together. And that is very hard to show in a TV program just by telling you about it. Whereas poetry, whether it be word or musical, is such a direct method to connect to your emotions and connect to your soul. So when you're hearing the stories, seeing the stories, and then connecting to it, I think it's a very powerful connection.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is we're not going to be playing whilst somebody tells that story.
You're telling the story through poetry.
Yeah, exactly. Poetry and music
with features of
but then with putting it in context in between. So it's going to be layered by the art, by the music, by the poetry, and contextualized by the history.
Yes.
And the landscape. One of the important things.
So you all have to research, given the information, and basically translate the information into
the poetry.
Into our imagination.
Yeah, I have a meeting, in fact, on Saturday, with the archaeologist, and we're gonna sit down and talk for a couple of hours about everything that I am interested in from the information he's already given me. He's emailed me so many files, which are so interesting. But we're gonna sit down and talk, and then I'll sit down after that and write poems. And then from those poems and from the context which I will give, they will then have that same emotion, that same feeling, and then they will, or maybe not, but they will still produce something which evokes that.
or
Or
doesn't evoke
doesn't
it, a
evoke it,
conversation
you
will,
know.
a conversation through three
Yeah.
parts of both, if you like, two musical and one spoken,
And
will
again,
change around that.
repeating what Jesse said earlier, that there will actually be the fourth voice because we are going to film it at the exact location that the stories happen. So there's an area that I can remember, which is the back-to-back houses where all the people working there lived.
The
So
beds
when
were never cold because
say again,
the beds were never cold because
yeah.
there were 3 shifts and they just went round. You always got into a warm bed.
So for us to stand in those ruins whilst Jesse speaks to us and perform it and film it. I mean, we've got drones ready to film all of this and all the rest of it. It's going to be an exciting project.
Wow. That is absolutely amazing. Um, and it's exactly what I've been trying to get across, and I'll continue to try to get across to people, that you are more than just a person that writes poems.
Yeah.
There's literally so much more to poetry than just poetry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I have read a lot of poems over the last year. As I say, I'm studying literature. It would be odd if I hadn't. But equally, behind every single poet's work that I have read, there is a whole lot more. So, for example, a poet called Shelley wrote in the wake of some awful kind of attempts at revolution, which ultimately failed. Wordsworth, just to name a easy one, he wrote and was informed by the nature around him. It wasn't just his voice that he was writing with, you know, he was in conversation with the land. And I think it's so important to remember that you are only a part of what you're going to create. Your culture, your surroundings, everything you have and have had and will have is going to be included in a poem that you write.
Wow. I man, you guys got my artistic side just going, man. And now I want to talk to everybody in other industries, because we our most recent episode was what was it? I can't remember, but it basically is disrupting other industries with poetry, right? And obviously disrupting is not the negative connotation of the word disrupting, but just adding value to other industries with your art. You know, and finding that you sometimes have to teach those other industries how well this could mesh.
Well, take the beginning of a feature film, for example, as a fairly old industry, but the right bit of music, obviously, everybody knows that, but 7 or 8 words of brilliant poetry or a couple of lines just spoken in the right way with the right thing underneath before the whole film starts, they can change the entire thing.
Equally, I've seen recently, I'm not quite sure where I've seen this actually, but there is a kind of move to try and incorporate poetry into business. So there are these kind of things where people are trying to produce a poetry book for the workplace as a kind of moment to relax your head, to make yourself
kind of
mindfulness in some ways. So I think what we do is like the epitome of mindfulness. It's put ourselves aside completely and write and create. But equally, when you read a poem, when you read anything, it's what I love about reading. You aren't yourself anymore. You have space, and it is that which is also so valuable to every other industry. You know, if everybody just took a moment, there would be a lot more kind of, I don't know, you'd be more healthy. There would be much more kind of mental awareness, and yeah. So
Well, I think the important thing that the world reality is not compartmentalized and categorized,
Right.
and yet we as humans seem to love to give banner headlines and boxes in order to sort this. And it's something as as an accordionist, which is much less, shall we say, use the word normal, compared to the violin. So the violin, you'd say you're a violinist, you've got almost instant acceptance. That's not a battle.
Mm.
If
That's
I
not how
say
I went to school, actually.
you're different, if I say I'm an accordionist, then all of a sudden you've kind of put yourself in one place. People have got a preconception as to what you are going to be, what's your style, what's your flavor. And actually, I'm not. I play the accordion, but I'm a musician, or I'm an artist, or I'm a creative. I just don't like this idea of
Yeah.
defining what we all are. So it isn't about poetry. It's not about music. It's not about art. It's not about business. It's about being a human. And it's as simple as that. These things should not have boundaries, shouldn't have delineation. They all should merge. And that makes much more sense to me than boxes.
Yeah.
Which might
Yeah.
explain the mess my studio's in, but don't ask me.
We had an episode. We had an episode with the lead editor at Forbes.com.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the topic was does poetry belong in business or something of the sort. And we were just pulling out ways that poetry can be incorporated into business. You all named a list of them, and basically, if a company has a message that they're trying to get across, they need to hire someone that's great with words.
Absolutely.
And not
that's all. That's what a poet is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Period. But in business, they call them copywriters.
Yeah.
Right. They write copy, the captions and but if you're really trying to compel someone, pull at heartstrings and things of that nature, you want to reach out to a poet.
A poet is somebody who says it in a way you could have never imagined, and won't be using the prosaic words, won't be probably even mentioning any of the words you would imagine would be in whatever it is you're trying to say. They say something different, and it comes from another angle, and it suddenly says the whole thing in half as much effort, and that's what a real poet does.
Yeah, but you know what? It's interesting because we're not only teaching or informing non-poets, we're teaching and informing poets that, again, you are more than just someone who writes poems. Like, you can write commercials, right? You can be in movies and things of that nature. So it's so important for us to bring on people like yourself, artists like yourself, to show them that, okay, yes, it's lockdown, it's COVID, but look what these folks are doing. There's no excuse.
Yeah. And actually, in a way, what you're saying is maybe COVID, lockdown, all that, there is a compression of what's possible. It's a taking away of your options. It, in a way, throwing you into a tiny box where everything's just, you don't have choices.
Yeah.
And our response to that, all of us, was to ignore that completely, create our own choices, to create our own escape route. And that's a different kind of creativity. Sometimes, even if you've accepted your proposition that commercial stuff can be a really valid place for a poet, you're looking at putting yourself in that box. And if you're trying to put yourself in a box, you're probably not going to succeed. Actually, if you can get into a place where that space is accepting you as a possibility, which is perhaps the challenge, then what you need to do is escape from the box, ignore the box, just create and use the creativity as power.
Yeah. There is no box.
There is no box.
And be yourself and write as yourself, because it's only you who's going to be able to say what you want to say. Like, whatever anybody thinks, no two people are the same and no two poets are the same. Yes, people write similar styles, but whatever you have to say,
might have more value than anyone else.
than you think it does. You know, it might be special. It might be just the thing the world needs to hear at that point.
Or the businessman.
Or the businessman.
Wow. Man, you all are awesome. And I'm really excited about how did you inbox us, or how did that work?
I inboxed you.
Yes.
And said, hey.
So you're the marketer.
Yeah.
We're sure as hell not.
Can't be us too.
And then you were like, yeah, this looks great. I really like this. Can you come on our podcast, please? I was like, yeah.
And look, and that's what you have to do.
Yeah. And we had that conversation at, I think it was 2:00 in the morning for me.
Yeah.
I was still up, couldn't sleep. Murray was also still up because he has a baby. My dad was asleep, as usual. But you know, it's you just have to take a chance and go for it. You know?
And you know what? It's so interesting. We get those DMs, and you know, some poets just want to get on the podcast to get attention, right? But on our end, the question for us is, one, what are you doing? What are you creating? What are you producing? And what can you teach others about how you did, or how are you doing what you did? Right? Because if it's just going to be an interview, that's not what we do. You know, we're having a conversation, and trust me when I tell you, when we get off this here, I'm going to start writing things down about what I can do with my art, with my platform, and I'm just blown away. I'm just blown away about how much you've been able to do since March on lockdown, on a landline phone, and you have a book, and you have 2 albums, and I'm like, okay, I have not done anything.
I'm thinking the number of diapers that Murray's changed as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's absolutely amazing to me, and the fact that the I can't even say the word I can't even say it. Say it for me.
I couldn't say it the other day either. I got into a pickle.
Say it slow real quick.
Archaeological.
Archaeological. Okay. Yeah. Goodness gracious. But in the moment, I'm sure you just got the idea that this would be an awesome marriage.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I just looked at the guy who was talking to me, and here's actually the thing that it was. I'm interested in the history, I'm interested in the place and all that. But the thing that actually clicked in my mind was the direct way he was telling me about what he cared about and how exciting it was to him. And I thought,
his passion is...
if we bring this together with what I know we will...
Basically, how can I help you tell the story?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think of it quite like that. I just thought, haha, that's great. Let's do something.
Do it, yeah.
But that's what I do. I just see not opportunities, it's the wrong word, because it's not for me. I just have ideas that feel like a creative thing. And as Murray knows all too well, 9 times out of 10, some horrifying process starts just afterwards.
Yeah.
Soon after.
Well, it's to provide value.
Sorry?
So it's an opportunity to provide value.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity, you know.
Yes,
I think too many times, you know, we get caught up in the negative connotation of words, and so many people would say, "Oh, you're an opportunist." No, that's not. You know, there's several different definitions of the word opportunity.
Yeah. So I would go with absolutely what you say. I see it as an opportunity to suddenly create something that is exciting to me, that is brings something that hasn't happened before, that just feels great. And it's going to add some value somewhere. I don't necessarily know what the value is, but it definitely is a thing.
If nothing else, it adds value to our life in a very selfish way. You know, doing this will be enriching and happy and a wonderful
massively fulfilling.
So
no, but now not only you all, but not only the archaeologists
Yeah.
in their project, but the poetry industry as well, because now more people say, oh, we can get poets now.
Yeah. It's
Not
true,
just
actually, because
singers and dancers and
if what we're just about to do works well, it's going to go to a very wide audience.
yes.
And that takes poetry in a new place, maybe, or at least a place where it's not often.
Going back to what you were saying about words having negative connotations.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about in America, but the word poet in England produces a certain reaction.
It's worldwide.
Okay. It means, you know, what do you know, a poet, people presume you are pretentious and just kind of, I don't know, highbrow and think you're above everyone else, but that is not what poet means. That is that is not the only meaning of the word, you know. And I think in some ways incorporating a poet into other industries might start to break down that stereotype. It might start to show that no, you don't just have to be shut in a library writing poems. You can be out there or there, or, you know, just
and
in
you
new
don't
situations.
have to be somebody with no money. Poet is also means
thank you.
Yeah. Nothing. Yeah. It doesn't have to be that. If you start to understand that, like I said a little while ago, a poet is one of the few people in the world who can encapsulate what you might think into just a few words and make it totally memorable and totally special. That's got real value to a lot of people. Well, maybe that's a good thing. Poets could be rich.
But that's what it takes. That's what it takes. It takes people who know that, right? And to share it with non-poets and with poets, because too many poets don't know that.
Sure.
You know, and so and the ignorance to that adds to the box.
Yeah. It increases the stereotype.
It fortifies the box. You know, the ignorance of not, you know, of not knowing that you can do so much more with the words that you write and speak. It just adds to the people that are saying poetry. You know, I don't know if you all watch America's Got Talent. Well, yeah. Well, it's like, do you all have the game shows?
Yeah,
we have Britain's.
Yeah, Britain's got.
Okay, Britain's got. Okay, right. So, a poet for the first time, it's my business partner, Brandon Leak. He just won.
Wow.
Yeah.
He just won with straight poetry, all words, no music.
That's amazing.
Congratulations.
Brilliant.
The first poet to audition got the golden buzzer.
Yeah.
And won the whole show.
That is incredibly impressive.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So that now opens people's eyes to say, okay, poetry's in the game now.
Yeah. Poetry is a thing suddenly.
Yes.
That's great.
That is fantastic.
That's a really profound thing. I think
it's also really heartening. It in some ways it means, well, even for me, I say all these things. Oh yeah, poetry shouldn't be this, poetry shouldn't be that. But ultimately, I go to a university where I am surrounded by people who think poet means poet, not you know
rhymes and metaphors, and that's it.
For me to hear that, it's also an important thing. You know, it means that I'm not just.
It's important, but it's
not just going to be living off baked beans for the rest of my life.
Oh,
you know,
you might be anyway, but
it's possible.
But it's also, isn't it, ironic in a way that it takes a big capitalist investment like that to give a validity to poetry.
Yeah,
it's great that it has. Yeah. Poetry's got the strength to
get through
that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you know, it's the momentum that has to be built.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
you know, that so that win alone has encouraged and inspired poets to say, hey, all right,
Definitely.
all right, so now all eyes are on poets now. Let me get my butt in gear.
Yeah.
You know, let me stop just writing about one thing.
Yes.
You know, because you really have to be diverse in your writing. You know, because if just writing about one thing, now you're putting yourself in a box.
Yeah. Your life isn't just one thing, and your poetry comes from your life.
Yes.
So why are you choosing one element? Why not have the whole thing?
It's
You know?
interesting. The stuff Jesse's doing with us, with Murray and I,
Yes.
is it's all pretty much either landscape or history based. But she's just had some verses published in another book, and those verses in a whole collection she's done, they're totally different. It's that's kind of young girl living now.
A fragmented experience of modern reality put into poet form, which is like the opposite of the
It's the
things
same
that I do with
voice.
them.
If you're used to reading poetry,
If you're
you can see
listening,
it's the same person. If
yeah.
you're listening, you can hear it's the same person.
Yeah.
But they're absolutely not in the same box. Couldn't be in more different boxes. And I guess that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Beauty for her there is that she's not having to think, oh, I will write it in this box. She's just allowing, and maybe this is a difficult thing, allowing her creativity to take more than one direction. Because it's easy to box yourself, to think, oh, that's
Yeah.
what I'm good at, that's what I feel, that's what I think. But
Right.
actually,
And
in open
success
enough,
can do that as well. Being
Sorry?
success can be a dangerous box
yeah.
as well.
Mm.
Yeah,
That
this
is
is
something
who I am.
hard to avoid self-stereotyping.
Yeah.
So I've
If you're known for that,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
and then you're, what do they call it? I know it's pigeonhole, but in the acting world, I can't remember. Typecast.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
quickly typecast yourself.
If you're Mr. Funny Man, you know, you can't play serious roles.
So it's interesting. I've struggled with this throughout my career as a violinist. I've classical. I've done concertos. I've toured the world doing that. I've toured America actually, playing Vivaldi's Fourth Season hundreds of times. And then now I'm in this group called Red Priest. It tours the world. We did Beijing, America,
New Zealand,
everywhere, New Zealand,
etc.
and it's a particular kind of thing, and it's nothing whatsoever like what I do with Murray. And to be able to do those different things and say, well, actually, it's me. I'm the artist. I do what the hell I like here. It's me. I'm going to be able to do that, and it's always going to be my valid voice. That's actually difficult. You have to fight against each bit of the industry at every point to be allowed to do that.
You do.
It's extraordinary. So I've ignored everybody at every point
Just
and done what I like.
Yeah. You have to. You have to ignore what other people's opinions are. You know, yeah. I love it. Man, I could really do this all night. And the crazy thing is, I don't know where to end. You know, because you all are just, oh my goodness. I have to bring you all back on soon.
We'd be delighted.
No, really, because I know you all have different directions too that we can go in, you know, but this would be like a 5-hour podcast episode. Because I mean, Adam alone, you're a veteran in art. I won't even just say in music, it's just in art. And Murray, I'm sure you as well. And Jesse,
I'm new.
I mean, but the thing is, you're not, because you have the knowledge of your father.
Yeah.
So you have years on you.
She does, and she's burst into consciousness so many years ahead of whatever I've been at any point along the way.
Yeah,
It's a very
and you have a leg up, because I won't say most, but a lot of artists are like the only artist in their family. You know, like it's tough for them. Am I? Somewhat, you know, because they have to go through the bumps and bruises themselves and not get the tutelage and be raised in it.
Yeah.
You've seen it for since you were young,
and now I'm learning. No, really, because see a young, clear mind that's not necessarily been as bruised or been through as many ways to get somewhere.
Right.
Things that she's understood along the way, and suddenly, okay, that's a very good way of looking at it. I get that.
Poet.
Wow. Yeah, no, that makes sense because you're benefiting from opportunities. I mean, just you're on the podcast in the United States because of Jesse's savvy.
Yeah, sure.
And her go-getterness, if you will, to inbox some random podcast and say, "Hey, poetry. Let's."
I looked at the page first. It wasn't random.
The other
but
thing,
but that's what it takes, so you all learn from each other, and that's an awesome thing. Listen, we speaking of different lanes, we have a program called Fighting Cancer with Poetry. Mm-hmm. Yes. And we get that question, what does that mean? How does that? So all of what we said, right? It is using words to inspire others. Obviously, those who have been impacted by cancer, and shows them that they can use this art to find a place of peace, to tell their story and inspire others. And we would love to connect with you all in some way, some form of fashion, to where we create some art in that way. I don't know if you all have been affected family wise or friend wise. I would imagine, because everybody has. It's that bad.
I lost my father to cancer, so I'm very
wow. Yeah, sorry to hear that. What kind of cancer?
Well, it was blood poisoning that got him in the end, but it was lymph node related.
Gotcha. Yeah,
but he'd had a bad stroke and he was wheelchair bound, and there was all sorts of it was very
complicated. Right. All of that. Yeah. Sure, for sure. Yeah. No. We've been doing that since 2012. When my close friend, it started off as a nonprofit that I started when my close friend passed away at the age of 25. Diagnosed at 18. Fought for 7 years with sarcoma cancer, the connective tissues, and but he didn't start writing poetry until after he was diagnosed. Right. And I never knew that. Like, we were close friends, grew up at the same church and everything. And it wasn't until after he transitioned, did his mother tell me that, and I was like, wow. And I wrote the obituary poem, for his funeral, and the poem that's in the back of the program.
Yeah.
And so, from there, just started to stay connected with his family, and produced a nonprofit. We gather a lot of poets around the country and beyond to kind of galvanize their poetry and their performance to inspire others. And we would love to work with you all in some way. I think that would be beautiful.
We would love that too.
I think talk to Jesse and
yes,
which I don't mean now, but talk to Jesse.
Indeed.
And find a way to make a link that would be meaningful, and then we'll see what.
One of my friends at school suddenly got diagnosed with a brain tumor. He's currently in the clear, but there's no guarantee that it's going to stay that way.
Sure.
And I think, as you're saying, for everybody, cancer is something which is very real and
at some point
very personal to everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure we could find some kind of way to.
Yeah, we'll talk. We'll DM each other and things. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you all for spending your Tuesday night
It's been a pleasure.
with us.
It's been a pleasure.
It has
And
been, thank you very much.
most definitely, it's been an eye opener and a heart filler because art is everywhere. Art is worldwide, and you guys have just showed people that literally you have no excuse to stop. COVID shouldn't stop you. A shutdown shouldn't stop you,
No.
right? And you all are a clear example of that. And I really appreciate you. If you all could, one by one, just kind of leave something with the people, whatever it might be, just whoever wants to jump in there.
I think it'd just be a goodbye and keep being creative and make the
Love
best of what you've got and how to do it.
Yeah, for me, it's you have to remember that your voice matters. Even if it only matters to you, it's important to express it, because allowing yourself to recognize that your voice is important is absolutely essential to your well-being, but also to any kind of success that you want to go for. So yeah, thank you for having us tonight.
Yeah, my thought, listening to Christoph just then saying that there's no reason to, there's no excuse. But actually, you can take it the other way and say the adversities, we're all going through various challenges, whether it be COVID or any of the other multiplicity of things that we could discuss in the world at the moment. Maybe that actually is your excuse to start. This whole journey started thanks to COVID. Not that any of us wanted COVID, but thanks to COVID, this journey has started. So maybe whenever we are challenged, that is our excuse to start. I like that.
Good sentence.
Amazing. I love it. Listen, it's the Poet Life Podcast. Please go to our website, thepoetlife.com. Check us out anywhere and everywhere. Social media, The Poet Life. As you can see, we're not just talking to artists in the States. We're going beyond across the world, and we're showing you that poetry is more than just poetry. Check us out. It's the Poet Life Podcast. Thank you all. You all have a good night.
Introducing the Poet Life Podcast. Go check it out today on your favorite platforms, including iTunes, Apple Music, and the website, thepoetlife.com.
Find a way.